Take you to the latest news coming in from South Asia this moment. The briefing by the Indian Armed Forces has just concluded, and we'll get you all the latest from our guests and my colleague Karthik Sharma, who's standing by patiently in our Wion studios. But just to take you through the big takeaways from that joint press conference, the pictures which you can see on your screens right now. The joint briefing has just concluded, and the main takeaway from that briefing is that one F-16 aircraft of the Pakistan Air Force was indeed shot down by the Indian Air Force, and that the Pakistani Air Force also deliberately targeted Indian military installations, and that there was enough evidence, as the visuals on your screens just more than elaborate, that the F-16s were indeed used by the Pakistani Air Force, and that was recovered from the wreckage of that aircraft which fell east of Rajouri in Jammu and Kashmir. All right, I'm told my colleague Karthik is standing by for more information on this. Karthik, good evening. Walk us through the main takeaways from that joint briefing by the Indian Army, Navy and Air Force.
I think it's a reiteration of a couple of points, Ramesh. I think the most important reiteration is that F-16 was down by Indian Air Force. AMRAAMs were used. Pakistan was earlier denying it. And F-16s are pretty aggressive planes. They have the capacity to do 9Gs, a very advanced set of avionics. So for an F-16 to be taken by a very aged MiG-21 Bison in itself is a feat. But India insists that the Pakistan wanted to attack military assets, whereas India only attacked non-military center in Balakot, which was a jihadi training point, and neither a civilian, not a military set point. But I think what I understand is they refrained from using the word an act of war. Because if another army attacks your military or military installation, it's an act of war. So I think somehow the line is being drawn. And I really don't think India is looking for any further escalation right now till the pilot comes back home. So they are happy that the pilot is coming back home. They have reiterated that military has been attacked, targeted by 20 aircrafts. And they have said we are ready. But yes, they have not taken a very pitched tone, or they have not taken a position whereby we can say that India is going to escalate the matter further. I think there's a bit of restraint there with a lot of anger.
Right, so as Karthik was point out, restraint exhibited by the Indian Armed Forces in that joint briefing, saying that although an F-16 plane was indeed used by the Pakistani Air Force, India will exercise restraint and act responsibly going forward. But just coming back to the material, the operative part of the joint briefing, Karthik, the fact that an F-16 was used, now under the terms of agreement between the US and Pakistan, F-16s were not supposed for offensive maneuvers. Does that demolish the Pakistani army spokesperson's myth, which was sent out yesterday, that no F-16s were used at all in that misadventure that took place yesterday morning?
Not only it demolishes that myth, Ramesh, but I think the larger problem remains, because two things have happened simultaneously. One is Wing Commander Abhinandan, and another is the larger objective of terrorism. Pakistan is saying that we are returning the Wing Commander in lieu of an offer of peace. But the larger issue remains that you have not acted against terror camps. You have not acted against those who perpetrated 26/11. So the root of the problem remains. Sometimes developments overtake a larger picture. Yes, he is coming back. I think fastest any time in Indian history. Last time was in 1965 when Cariappa's son's plane was down, and Ayub Khan and Cariappa were, when in undivided colonial India were together. He called up Cariappa and said, well, we'll release your son. But Mr. Cariappa said no, he will come back with others. So perhaps, yes, in a way this is the fastest, but the root problem remains. It is terrorism. It's like Pakistan is waging a war against India but calls it terrorism.
Right, and let's talk a bit about the imminent release of Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, Karthik. How is one supposed to interpret this? Is it, as many would say, a big diplomatic win for India, number one? Number two, is Pakistan and Imran Khan buying time by allowing to release Wing Commander Abhinandan? Three, is it, and can it be seen as a genuine peace offer? And fourth, would that be a PR stunt at the end of the day?
I think two things are happening simultaneously, and I'll give you a reference to what happened in 1999 when Indian Army was trying to take over the peaks which were overrun by Pakistani regulars. There was a decisive intervention by Bill Clinton on behalf of India, pressurizing then Musharraf to vacate rest of the peak, because India would have fought peak by peak. The whole episode ended, the war ended in 3 months, but could have extended to 6 months, and there was the chance that Indian military would have crossed the LOC. In this case, American administration again intervened on behalf of India, and there was a pressure on Pakistan to release the captain, the wing commander of the Indian Air Force. But I would say it was coupled with a strong position taken by Indian government that neither we'll give you any papers, neither seek consular access, nor we'll have negotiation, because we will not allow this movement to become another Kandahar. So coupled together, I think it worked.
Right, Karthikeya, do stay on. Let me take a moment to introduce our next guest. Vijay Kumar Nambiar, a former Deputy National Security Advisor of India, joins us on this bulletin. Mr. Nambiar, thank you for joining us on Wion World is One. But very quickly, before I go across to Mr. Nambiar, let's take a recap of the sound bites from that joint briefing by the Indian Navy, Army and the Air Force.
IF has also learned that Pakistan has announced that Wing Commander Abhinandan will be returned to India tomorrow. IF is happy and looks forward to return of Wing Commander Abhinandan. Thank you. There have been many factually incorrect statements that have been made by Pakistan. The first blatant disinformation was that 2 IAF aircraft were shot down by Pakistan and 3 pilots of Indian Air Force were down. This figure was later revised downwards to 2 IAF aircraft and 2 pilots. The fact, however, is that Indian Army units had reported sighting 2 parachutes falling in POJ&K, which were of 2 F-16 pilots, the aircraft which was shot down by the MiG-21. Pakistan later in the evening changed its statement to say that 1 Indian pilot was in their custody. Therefore, it was only by late evening that Pakistan accepted the fact. Secondly, Pakistan claimed that they intentionally dropped weapons in open space where there was no human presence or military posts. The fact is that Pakistan Air Force aircraft targeted military installations. However, they were intercepted by IF fighter aircraft which thwarted their plans. Although PF bombs have fallen in Indian Army formation compounds, however, they were unable to cause any significant damage to our military installations due to a swift IF response. On 27th February 2019, at around 1000 hours, Indian Air Force radars detected a large package of Pakistan Air Force aircraft heading towards the Indian territory, towards General Area Jangar. They breached the Indian airspace west of Rajouri in the Sundarbani area. The ingressing aircraft were observed to be at various levels. IF fighters, including MiG-21 Bison, Sukhoi 30 MKI and Mirage 2000, were tasked to intercept the intruding Pakistan Air Force aircraft. The Pakistan Air Force aircraft attempting to target our military installations were intercepted by the IAF fighter aircraft which foiled their attack. Although PAF bombs have fallen in the Indian Army formation compounds, however, they were unable to cause any damage to our military installations. In the aerial combat that ensued, 1 F-16 of Pakistan Air Force was shot down by an IAF MiG-21 Bison aircraft. The F-16 crashed and fell across the line of control in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The IAF lost 1 MiG-21 in the aerial engagement, and though the pilot ejected safely, his parachute drifted into the Pakistan-occupied J&K, where he was taken into custody by the Pakistan Army.
We continue to maintain strict vigil along both the line of control and the IB sector. Our ground-based air defense weapon systems have been put on high alert all along the line of control and also in some parts of the IB. Our mechanized forces have also been placed on standby. I wish to assure the nation that we are fully prepared and in a heightened state of readiness to respond to any provocation by Pakistan. Despite the turn of events, as you all are aware, the Indian Army is committed to maintaining peace and stability in the region and will continue to act against agencies who harbor inimical designs against India and the citizens of our country. As my Air Force counterpart has elaborated, on 27th February 19, the Pakistan Air Force attempted to target our military establishments in J&K. Specifically, they targeted a brigade headquarter, a battalion headquarter, our defenses, and a logistic installation. However, given the high level of preparedness along the line of control and the immediate and punitive response given by our own forces, the Pakistan Air Force's designs were foiled. And good evening to everyone. In response to the counter-terrorist strike by the Indian Air Force, Pakistan Army first resorted to unprovoked ceasefire violations, as you are aware, in Sundarbani, Bimbar Gali, Naushera and Krishna Ghati sectors on 26th February, with effect from 5 o'clock in the evening and again during the night. This was responded to by the Indian Army in a befitting and appropriate manner.
The Indian Navy is deployed in a high state of readiness and remains poised in all three dimensions: on surface, undersea and in air, to deter, prevent and defeat any misadventure by Pakistan in the maritime domain. I can assure you of a resolute, swift and strong response by the Navy when needed. We stand as one with the Army and Air Force to ensure the safety and security of our nation and our citizens.
Now we are joined live by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Zidan Sabal. Good evening to you, Zidan. He is at the press conference where the briefing has just concluded. What are the main takeaways that we get from that briefing?
Well, a very responsible briefing by the Indian Army, Air Force and Navy has come to an end. It was 30 minutes long, and the key point that came out was a question was asked on our defense personnel who is in Pakistani custody. How does the Air Force feel? We know there is bonhomie since the announcement at 4 p.m. today. So the response was this. The Air Force said they are happy about it, and what Pakistan did was in consonance of the Geneva Convention, something that all the experts have been saying in consonance of the Geneva Convention. So clearly there should not be any bonhomie. What Pakistan did was part of the rules, part of international norms, so something that was a responsibility of Islamabad. Now, telling about the details of the press conference, the details of the press conference were from Tuesday to Wednesday, today, all 3 days, and starting with the Indian strikes in Balakot at the terror camp of the JEM, Jaish-e-Mohammed, the terror group responsible for the Pulwama attack, and then after that on the Pakistani strikes on military installation. We know the strikes which India did were on terror camps. No civilians or the military installations were damaged, and the army today clarified, the Air Force today clarified that in the entire process India was able to inflict lot of damage on the camps. On the Pakistani strikes, the Indian Air Force said that India was able to down a F-16 fighter jet of Pakistan and gave the proof, gave the physical hard evidence at the press conference. And of course, about the today's development, the Air Force has expressed its happiness and said what Pakistan has done today is part of the Geneva Convention. Clearly, the narrative which Pakistan has been spreading, that it's a goodwill gesture, it is a part of an international process, and that is what Islamabad did. The narrative basically is the issue of terrorism emanating from Pakistan.
Yes, Siddhant, on that gesture at the press it was just said that India considers this gesture as seen only in accordance with the Geneva Convention and not as a gesture of peace. Any more on that?
Well, it's basically a part of the rules, part of the international standards. Yes, the Pakistanis are now saying it's a grand gesture. The grand gesture should be on the issue of terrorism, that Pakistan should shut shop of terror proxies and terror camps on its territory. In POK, in Balakot, of course, we know that strikes have happened. The message has been sent. While India is focusing on diplomacy, making a world consensus. If you look at the releases coming after the Indian strikes on the terror camp, they basically called for restraint, but also called on Pakistan to shut the shop of terrorist groups and organizations on its territory. That is what India is doing, diplomacy. Quietly, what Pakistan did, well, last evening at this time around only, the diplomats in Islamabad were called. They were told that India was planning to launch missile strikes in Pakistan and they are planning to bomb Karachi, and they closed the entire airspace of their country, stopped Samjhauta Express, clearly creating hysteria, which was not the case. India has been focusing on diplomacy and war was never an option on Delhi's table.
Thank you very much for that report there, Siddhant. That is Siddhant Sabal coming to us from that presser that we just watched. And now let me hand over to you, Ramesh, on going back to our guest.
Right. Thank you, Alison. If I can go back to my guest, Vijay Kumar Nambiar, who is joining us from New Delhi. Ms. Nambiar, your first thoughts on the developments of the day. First and foremost, the decision by Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan to release Wing Commander Abhinandan tomorrow, and the just concluded joint briefing by the Indian Army, Navy and Air Force demolishing the Pakistani myths and misinformation that no F-16s were used in yesterday's violation of the Indian airspace. Your thoughts, Mr. Nambiar?
Thank you. Let me first of all refer to the Tri-Service press conference that was just held. It was postponed from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock this evening. And there are three elements of it. One is the tone. Clearly the tone was very responsible, very professional, no hyperbole, no bluster. At the same time, fixing exactly on the facts that they saw it as India sees it. And the tone was, I think, extremely responsible, and it conveyed the right kind of spirit of both determination. There was a reflection of the anger in the country, but at the same time, there was also a fair amount of restraint. To get to the content also referred to the need to focus on the facts as we saw it, that is, that the Pakistani attack, as in contradistinction to the Indian attack being on the terrorist camp, the Pakistani attack by the aerial intrusion being directed or targeted at military installation. That was very clearly underlined, and the interception of these aircraft by the Indian Air Force. And then, of course, the question of the F-16. And that was also very clearly focused on giving factual details to substantiate the Indian statement that they had downed the F-16. Clearly and very, very competently done. The third was the mood. The mood in terms of, particularly in response to the announcement of the release of the possible release very soon, tomorrow, of the Indian pilot. Again, the statement was that this was something that was to be expected, and the Air Force was happy about it, but at the same time, it was something that was expected under the Geneva Convention. Again, very tightly in terms of what was the factual situation. I think this is it was clearly a press conference where they didn't want to get into any dramatics, into any of the political aspects. Questions were asked even about whether the Pakistani action could be considered an act of war. They very consciously refrained from getting into any such discussion, but it showed that at the same time they said that it was an attack on military installations and stepped short of describing it in any other fashion. I think these showed both the high sense of responsibility as well as the determination of the Indian Armed Forces, their preparedness, their willingness to take whatever action was necessary in order to respond to any eventuality. Now, coming to the next question which you said about the Prime Minister Imran Khan's announcement of the release, I think that one should describe it as a very good gesture. And while it is clear that the Air Force has described it as something which is to be expected and it would be normal under the Geneva Convention, I think it is so. But at the same time, I think clearly there is a political aspect to this gesture. The speed with which it has been announced, I think it is extraordinary and in the circumstances, and I think it is clearly meant to convey a political message. But clearly, from the Indian standpoint, this is not enough. It is important that this good gesture by the Pakistani Prime Minister is followed up by genuine steps to cut the nexus between the Pakistani governmental authorities and terrorist actions and groups, and something has to be done by them to call to account the terrorist organizations like the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and more particularly to bring to book their leader Masood Azhar. And unless some concrete, genuine, verifiable action is taken by the Pakistanis to look at this aspect of India's concern, I'm not sure that just even the gesture, the good gesture that was made, would be seen by India as politically sufficient to get a response from India in terms of a political counter gesture.
Mr. Nambiar, I'll come back to you in a bit, but if I can just take a moment to introduce another guest joining us in the studios here this evening, Major General G.G. Dwivedi. General, thank you so much for joining us on Wion Lisbon. Appreciate it. I want to ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Nambiar.
Right.
How is one supposed to interpret this Pakistani gesture of agreeing to release Wing Commander Abhinandan tomorrow?
Right.
Would you see it as a genuine peace offer, or a tactic or a ploy to buy time,
Right.
or even a PR stunt?
Right. I'll just give you a small perspective, that what has happened in last 2.5 days is actually a turning point, because we have taken the whole issue from just fighting terrorism to fighting proxy war. And instead of fighting in our own territory, we are taking it across the line of control.
Right.
So that marks actually a paradigm shift in our whole strategy. Now, in last 2.5 days, one should see how the events have unfolded, and that's from the strategic point of view. That firstly, Pakistan never expected that we will go across, and so it has come as a big shock. So Pakistan is in a state of tremendous shock, and two myths have got demolished. First myth was that we will be only fighting this war on our own territory, we will never go across, and we can never actually confront the terrorists. Today we hit them in their own territory. Second myth, which is very, very important, is that they never thought that it will affect the Pakistan army, because they were having a field show. We are fighting the terrorists, we are losing blood, and they are watching the fun. So now, this 2.5 days has actually turned the tables. Now Pakistan army they always realized that after successive defeats, they came on to proxy war, and they found that they can fight the proxy war, and never get into conventional conflict. Now, here is the situation that we have now firstly hit the targets which are non-military targets and only hit their terrorist camps.
Right.
Their retaliation has escalated because we have no terrorist camps, they can't hit anything. So they have tried to hit the areas in Jhangat and Lam Valley where I have served. I know physically each inch of ground. So that is, they have escalated. Now, three things are what is happening where the situation is very different. Firstly, globally, Pakistan is totally isolated. They have no, even the friends, two friends, Saudi Arabia and China, was the defense situation in China, even they have told them in very, very discreet terms, please back off. And one of the areas which are very sensitive that they had, our pilot, unfortunately had crashed into territory. Now their past record is very poor. I fought Bangladesh war and Pakistan, reputation in handling the prisoners is dismal. In fact, it is shameful. So they were trying to see, can we bargain it out? Can we get some mileage or political mileage? But they got the message very clear that India will not tolerate any harm to our air warrior. So now they are in a very difficult dilemma that they don't want to confront it conventionally. Their nuclear bogey has been exposed. Sub-conventional warfare has now taken a different turn. Now their whole effort is to somehow wiggle out of the situation. And who is the main player is the Pakistan army. Now all these politicians are talking on behalf of the Pakistan army, and today I was just listening to their minister, the Sheikh Rashid.
That's right.
He accepted in parliament that 14 aircraft came and they dropped some bombs, but they hit the trees. Now that is again a cover, but we have really hit the nail right into the Pakistan's coffin.
Sure.
Can I ask you on that, Major General? Do you consider it an effective strategy by India not giving into what could be seen as Pakistani blackmail?
Yes, absolutely, because Pakistani thought that they can use this as a tool of blackmail. But I think we had given a message to the Deputy High Commissioner, a very pointed message that please return our pilot or we are going to take you to task. And this message has also come from Saudi Arabia. The foreign minister has flown in. And he is carrying a message from Mohammed bin Salman, who is actually the de facto, though he is the prince, but he is the king. And also, I think, Wang Yi also, the foreign minister of China, they have been in dialogue. And he also said, look, don't now bite more. You are going to be in for a very serious problem. So, the peace overtures, Pakistan DNA has never had peace as part of the DNA signature. They are totally in a very, very compulsive environment. And that's why they couldn't bargain it out. Now they are trying to win the goodwill of the world, thinking that this will be seen as a humanitarian, as a goodwill gesture, and they will be able to at least get some kind of, space.
Sure. I want to go across to my guest, Mr. Nambiar, one more time on the discussion. Mr. Nambiar, General Dwivedi says that peace is not in the Pakistani DNA. Now, what about, in your estimation, does this gesture of agreeing to release Wing Commander Abhinandan officially complete, in your estimation, the de-escalation process? Or do you think Pakistan is still on notice and it has to come good on its promise of acting against terrorism, of clamping down on terrorist groups, including Masood Azhar and the like?
Clearly not. As I mentioned, it's not possible to assume that this is the final step in the de-escalation and that it's time for India to respond. The return of a person who has fallen into their hands is just one gesture, and I think it's a good gesture. It's clearly a political gesture on the part of the Prime Minister, but unless it is followed up by action which will meet the needs, the concern of the Indian government, which has been their primary concern, the terrorist groups and their leader, I think there will not be any completion, it will not be a hard stop as it were now. I don't think it can be considered, and India will have to think in terms of putting additional pressure. It is true that we have put considerable diplomatic pressure, and I think the actions of the Saudi foreign minister and of the Chinese foreign minister also are to an extent a reflection of the pressures which India has been exerting internationally. But I think we should still be a little careful in assuming. We should not assume that we have completely convinced and that these countries are going to change necessarily, and to in a sense get a judgment out that Pakistan is completely internationally isolated. I think that would probably, we still have a lot of work to do, and it is important that Pakistan actually understands that this is not the final step in de-escalation, that there is still, India is prepared to go it is prepared to go individually and by itself, take the steps that are necessary to bring its concerns to adequately satisfied. And I think therefore there is still a need for all sides to consider the tensions that are now on the military aspect, and to take care that all sides behave with restraint, and the Pakistanis recognize that the Indian concerns have not yet been satisfied. Of course, it's a substantial gesture, and I think it's an important gesture that needs to be recognized. But unless there is action taken, perhaps some effort to even to in a sense neutralize even the leadership of the Jaish-e-Mohammed through some action which they can take, even to a person like the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, that would probably perhaps go to some extent to see whether or not we can you can really establish credibly that Pakistan is cutting its nexus with terrorist groups and terrorism itself.
All right, thank you very much. We are unfortunately running out of time in this bulletin. Thank you very much to Vijay Kumar Nambir, former Deputy NSA, and also thank you to our in-studio guest, Major General David Divedi. Thank you very much for joining us.